My son's teacher has been giving him some strange homework. His latest assignment was horrifying. I'm not a massive fan of homework, but it seemed like the homework that Mrs. Wagner always said quite simple tasks that could easily be completed in a night for the most part. Initially, Dylan had to ask a parent and find out what their parents did for work and ask 3 questions about their job. But as time went on, I started to get scared. The homework began to get a little more personal. Every night I would ask Dylan what his homework was for that night, and I would help him with it if you needed help. That's when I noticed the homework becoming a little bit strange. One night, on Dylan's 3rd week of being in the new class, he came home looking upset. Asked him when he entered the kitchen what was wrong, and he told me that everything was okay. I could tell, though, that something was wrong, but he didn't want to tell me. Dylan spent most of the night in his room. We decided to let him stay there for a while, but after an hour or 2, I went in to see him and let him know that it was time to go to bed. I walked down to his room, opened the door, and when I looked inside, I saw that he had already fallen asleep over his workbook. I quietly walked over to him to gently wake him up and move him to his bed. But that's when I saw it. The homework task that was set for that night, the title that was written in Dylan's workbook was, "Would I miss my parents if I no longer lived with them?" At first I was taken aback. This was very weird task to set for a group of 14 and 15-year-olds. I didn't really know how to react to this. I continued to read, though, to see what else he had written. He had written, "I would miss both my mom and dad very much. I love them both a lot. They help me with everything. I love spending dinner time with them, but I would probably love someone else as much as them if I had to. Like you were saying today, Mrs. Wagner, when I read the final sentence, I felt chills down my spine. The word struck me like a brick to the face. What had Mrs. Wagner been telling my son? What was the purpose of telling him these things? I decided, probably stupidly, not to tell my wife about what I had found. She would worry, and she probably had a right to worry. But I didn't want to concern her. I decided that I would instead confront Mrs. Wagner tomorrow and ask her about the strange homework task. The next day, I took Dylan to school like I normally do, except this time I got out and walked up to the classroom with him. I saw Mrs. Wagner alone in the classroom as I entered the room, and she greeted me with a smile. "Hey, how are you?" she said as I entered the classroom. "How is Dylan settling in?" She was dressed in a flannel skirt with a black jacket, and her brown hair was slightly curled. I answered that he was settling in well, but I did have 1 or 2 concerns. She asked what they were, and so I explained. "I was just curious about the homework you said yesterday, the one about how much they would miss their parents. I'm just concerned because it is a very strange and confronting thing to ask a group of 9th graders. I also noticed that Dylan wrote that he might have to love someone else if he had to, like you told him. I would really like you to explain that," I asked her quite bluntly. "Oh, that," she replied as she let out a slight laugh. "Yesterday I was teaching about how parents love and protect their kids, but also how that there are also other people that would be there to help them if they need it." I wasn't satisfied with this answer and was about to question her further when suddenly a large group of school children entered the classroom. They were all walking in 2 rows. They all greeted Mrs. Wagner and greeted her one by one. They seemed very well behaved, too well behaved. I then saw Dylan take a seat next to one of the students who was staring to the front of the classroom with their arms crossed at the entrance of the rest of the class. Dylan's behavior seemed to change. He seemed to sit up a bit straighter, and his eyes widened as he began staring at the rest of the class. I looked around and noticed that all of the students were staring at the same spot. All their eyes were pointed at Mrs. Wagner. Something didn't feel right, but I knew that Dylan needed to stay at school, and this was probably some sort of morning routine they had. I decided that I would pick Dylan up from school, though, and so I left work a little bit early and drove over to the school. When the bell rang, most of the kids came running and screaming out of the gate apart from Mrs. Class. They all walked out in a line, walking in time. This disturbed me. I had never seen a group of students are well-behaved, especially even after the school bell had rung. Dylan walked over to the car and hopped in. He didn't say anything, and sat in his seat, staring straight forward. I asked him if he was okay, and he just gave me a blunt response almost instantly. Yes, I drove him home in silence, and when we got home and inside, Dylan went straight to his room and closed the door. I knew something was definitely wrong, but I didn't know what. I decided to leave him alone until my wife got home and I would tell her everything that had been going on, and listened, and started to look more and more worried with every word I said. Maybe I should go and talk to him. He might like that, she said. Once I had finished explaining everything, I agreed, and so she went into his room and I waited out in the lounge room for them to finish talking to each other. 15 minutes later, Dylan walked out of his room and into the lounge room. He was holding a small workbook and he said, "Can you help me with my homework, Dad?" "Of course, come and show me what you need help with," I replied. He held out the notebook and I took it out of his hands and read the homework task for tonight. Written on the top line of the page was one task: research the best way to inject your parents with anesthetic. I barely finished reading the sentence when I felt a sharp pain in my neck, and I looked down and saw the needle sticking out of the side of my neck. Dylan was holding the other end of the needle, a blank stare on his face. Everything started to go black, and the last thing I remember seeing is Dylan staring down at me as I lay on the floor. I don't know how long it was out, but I was awoken by my wife screaming and crying. I woke up startled as she continued to scream. "He's gone. Dylan's gone." She kept screaming. I looked up at her, and the first thing I saw was the small pinprick that was on the side of her neck. She had been injected too. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I had to find my son. I tried my best to get up, but I think the drug hadn't properly moved properly. I could move my arms, so I managed to get my phone out of my pocket and dial the police. I explained to them what had happened, and they said that they would send officers out and would begin looking for Dylan. I then noticed that it was already 9 in the morning, and so I decided to ring the school, see if Dylan had gone there. I dialed, and a lady answered the phone. I asked if she had seen Dylan for Mrs. Wagner's class. "No, I am very sorry, but we haven't seen him today. In fact, we haven't seen anyone for Mrs. Wagner's class today. They're all absent, which is very odd, because Mrs. Wagner hasn't shown up for work either today." The lady on the phone said I hung up and sat in silence for a moment. My wife had heard what the lady said, so she also just sat there in total silence. All 3 weeks ago, and Dylan is still missing, along with Mrs. Wagner and the rest of his classmates. All the parents of the kids in Dylan's class have the same story. They were injected with something by their own children, and when they woke up, their child was gone. No one knows where they went, but we all have the same questions. Were they all together? Was Mrs. Wagner with them? Was this whole planned? Exactly a month after the kids disappeared, the parents of Dylan's classmates and I gathered for a meeting at the town hall. We needed to share our experiences, our fears, our guilt. But as we were sharing our stories, one parent, Mrs. Johnson, whose son was also in Mrs. Wagner's class, remembered a strange detail. Mrs. Wagner had often spoken about a cabin her family owned deep in the woods, about 50 miles north of town. The police had searched her home in nearby areas, but nobody thought to check the cabin. Armed with this new information, we immediately called the police and relayed the information. They promised to launch a search the next morning and advised us to stay home for our safety. We couldn't just sit and wait, though. A few of the other parents and I decided to take matters into our hands. We gathered flashlights, maps, and a few essentials, and in the dead of the night, drove towards the woods. We navigated the dense forest for hours with silence, broken only by the sound of rustling leaves and our pounding hearts as the sun began to rise. We came across an old, dilapidated cabin. The windows were boarded up and the paint was peeling off, but it was still standing. My heart pounded in my chest as we approached the cabin. We called for our kids, praying they would hear us and respond. Instead, what greeted us was an eerie silence. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the creaking door of the cabin. What we found inside was beyond our worst nightmares. The cabin was empty, but the walls were covered in scribbled writing and drawings that looked like they were done by children. A detailed plan was sketched out on one wall, outlining a strategy for the children to eject their parents and make their way to the cabin. The plan was signed with Mrs. Wagner's name as we frantically scanned the room. Something else caught our attention. A stack of notebooks lay on a dusty table. The cover of each notebook had a child's name, the names of all the missing children from Mrs. Wagner's class. I picked up Dylan's notebook, my hand shaking. I flipped through the pages, filled with more strange homework assignments, notes and ramblings that seemed to be instructions for Mrs. Wagner. The last page stopped my heart. It was a drawing made by Dylan. It showed all the children, including him, standing hand in hand with Mrs. Wagner. They were standing at the edge of what seemed like a cliff, all smiling and under the drawing. Dylan had written one chilling line: how to eliminate your family, including yourself.
Someone keeps depositing money into my account. It was fun until they started asking me to do things. The first deposit came on a Tuesday. I was on my way to lunch when my phone vibrated in my pocket. Woohoo, you just got paid, my budgeting app gleefully told me. That's odd, I thought. Payday wasn't until Friday I opened the app to find a deposit of $250. It was from a sender I didn't recognize. AWTSGY 2276. I quickly shot off a text to my husband. It was our joint account, but he didn't recognize it either. My next thought was PayPal. I did occasionally get weird payments. I have a crafty side hustle that's more of a side crawl, but those payments usually say PayPal in the transaction. So who was just giving me money? It must be a scam. But as the hours went by, I didn't get any weird texts or phone calls. That fat $250 just sat there in my bank account taking up space. We should give it back, my husband said when I got home. I don't think we could do that. Sure we can. We call the bank and tell them to reverse the transaction. I shot him a look. Or we could just keep it. Someone did give it to us. That's unethical. What's unethical was forcing the kids to eat rice and beans for lunch every day. I slammed the refrigerator shut and plopped down on the couch. Look, I feel a little weird about it too, okay? But it's not like I picked up a wallet someone dropped and found $250 in it. Someone gave this to us, whether it was accidental or not. We argued about it until we went to sleep. Well, do not argue more. Just aggressively talked at each other. With 3 kids and 2 full-time jobs, neither of us had the energy to properly argue anymore. When I woke up the next morning, there was a text from an unknown number waiting for me at 2:13 p.m. today. Go to the corner of 12th Ave in North St. Take a photo of the short man in the black coat. What the heck? But Jerry had already left for work. I'd tell him about it later. The weird text from a wrong number. As I got the kids ready for school, I couldn't stop smiling. Tomorrow you guys are going to get a special lunch. Not rice and beans. Something really good, I told them as we walked down the driveway. After waving to them on the bus, I left for work. But then another text came in as I was riding the elevator up. If you want to keep the $250, take the photo. My throat went dry. It wasn't free money. Somewhere too weirdo wired $250 to me. The elevator doors slid open and I stumbled out. How do they have my number? Is it someone I know? I glanced around at the hall of cubicles, at the people I'd worked side by side for 5 years. Ed. Ed is weird enough to pull some poop like this, but then I frowned. If Ed were wiring me $250, he would be asking for a photo or something else. I set my phone face down on the desk and got to work. I didn't spend another thought on the text. I pretended it didn't even happen. I just focused on my happy little spreadsheets on the upcoming presentation and hoped it would all go away by 5. It didn't. At 2 o'clock sharp, my phone buzzed loudly, and when I pulled up the text, my breath caught in my throat. Why haven't you left yet? I glanced wildly around the office, but nobody was looking at me. I ran over to the window. The sidewalk below was filled with people, but none of them were looking up in my direction. Fear pounded through my veins. Psst. You want to give your kids that special lunch tomorrow, don't you? I froze. No. They'd been in my yard, watching me, and now they were somewhere on the street or in this very office watching my every move. I shot up from the desk and ran to the elevator. It took me 8 minutes to get to the corner of 12th and North, running in heels. Panting, I glanced around at my surroundings, but I didn't see anything out of place. A woman jogging by, a mother pushing a stroller, 2 businessmen arguing as they crossed the street, and at 2:13, a short man in a black coat strolled into view. He pressed the button for the crosswalk. Quickly, I whipped out my phone, pretended I was texting, and snapped a photo of him. I rushed back to the office building, tears stinging my eyes as my fingers slid across the screen. Here's your photo. I texted you with the image. Now leave me the duck alone. After work, I went to the grocery store. I got my kids organic sliced turkey and aged Gouda and effing gourmet Swiss chocolate for lunch tomorrow. I played their stupid little sick game, and damn it if I wasn't going to reap the rewards. As the Gouda approached the conveyor belt, my phone vibrated. You just got paid. My heart fell fell into my stomach, and it fell through the floor when I saw the amount, $1,000. Whatever they were going to ask me to do tomorrow, I had a feeling it was going to be a lot worse than taking a photo of some random guy. I threw my groceries into the trunk of the car, the whole world going blurry with my tears. Just ignore it. Whatever they ask you to do tomorrow, just don't respond. They'll take the money back and that'll be it. Then you can go to the police and tell them everything. But I was naive to assume they'd wait until tomorrow, because as I started the car, my phone buzzed again. Drive to the pier. I stared at those 4 words, my heart pounding in my chest, and then I leaped into action. I don't want to play your sick effing game. I texted, my hand shaking. Take your money back. I don't want it. Leave me alone. It's too late for that. I swallowed. What do you mean it's too late? I wrote back. 3 dots popped up showing they were typing, and then the message appeared. Because the cargo is already in your back seat. My heart pounded in my ears. You really shouldn't leave your car unlocked, Lynn. I closed out of the texting app, pulled up the phone, and began dialing 911. Something thumped against the back of my seat. Every muscle in my body froze. I held my breath. The shadows in the rearview mirror shifted, but I couldn't quite make out. First, drive to the pier and you'll be safe. But if you call the police, they didn't need to finish that sentence. I swung out of the parking lot and drove as fast as I could to the pier. When I got there, I parked in a dark little corner and cut the lights. Now in the darkness, in the silence, I could hear them breathing. A steady rush of air right behind my ear. Close your eyes. I squeezed them shut tight. Rustling movement in the back seat. And then the opening and closing of a car door. Faint footsteps on the pavement, receding into the darkness. I let out the breath I'd been holding. I don't know how long I'd been sitting there with my eyes closed, but I finally felt like it was safe to open them when I hadn't heard the footsteps in a long time. I sobbed as I drove home, so thankful I was alive, praying that this whole nightmare was over. Whomever this person was, they'd use me as much as they could and would move on to the next poor soul. But I wasn't so lucky, because this morning when I woke up, I had a new notification. Woohoo, you just got paid. The amount, $10,000. The part of the deep web that we aren't supposed to see. I assume you all know about the deep web? Well, what you've heard is true. It's not a great place. While some people are there to score smokable grass or firearms, or even out of sheer curiosity, others, well, they're not up to anything good. But I'm not here to talk about their sickos. I'm here to talk about what lies beyond that point. The more cryptic and unexplainable part of the internet. The part that nobody's supposed to see. There was an infographic too cropped up a while ago. Not sure when. The 8 levels of the internet. Maybe you've seen it. As interesting as it was, it's a complete book. I'm sorry, what? Polymeric physical derivation means nothing. And the primer system. I guess somebody is a fan of Warhammer. No, there are no quantum mechanics involved here. However, that doesn't mean it was an easy place to find. Now, I'm not going to begin to tell you how to get here. It's unlikely that you'll be able to. Even if I did, I'm not tuning my own horn here. I just don't have a life outside of us. I was warned, of course. Everybody told me I wasn't going to like what I saw, that I wouldn't even understand it. Now I'm passing off that warning to you. Don't try to look for this. There's no official name for this place, or at least I haven't seen one. There were rumors, however. These range from Illuminati chat room to a virtual holding cell for an experimentally. I've gone rogue. In reality, it's a lot worse. After a long and painful process of breaking down firewalls and encryptions, solving bizarre philosophical riddles, and following hidden links, I was finally directed to a blank page with 1 line of text and a text box underneath. Quid queris? Latin for what do you seek? I remember feeling surprised, but in retrospect, I didn't know what I was expecting. I'll admit I was a bit stumped here, partly because I didn't know the answer to that question. I had no objective. I just wanted to see if I could do it. I tried some generic answers at first. I typed in the truth and enlightenment, you know, Matrix poop. Nothing happened. I tried a bunch of answers, but none of them worked. I was getting frustrated at this point. Maybe this was a gag page.Maybe I hadn't figured anything out. If only. I tried something off the wall. Not sure how this came to me or why I thought it would work, but I typed in what also seeks me. Now that I think about it, this thing might have been an AI. To my surprise, the page went blank, like fully blank. I waited. After about 5 minutes, I was directed to what looked like a forum. No, not even that. It was more basic, just a list of links over brownish-yellow background. The links themselves were indecipherable, just seemingly random sequences of characters, symbols, and letters. A lot of them I had never seen before. It almost looked like an alien language, just a code I didn't understand. At this point, expectations were off the wall. Each link was shot in the dark. I clicked on the first one. It loaded up a live feed of what seemed to be the Paris catacombs. I watched for a while, but it was ultimately uneventful. I moved on to the next link. It was a shaky video in a dark setting, but I could make out men in tactical gear. They were at a house, opening doors and sweeping each room. Eventually, they kicked one down to reveal a creature tall and humanoid with scaly skin. It was gnawing on a dismembered arm. They tried shooting at it, but it escaped out the window. The video stopped there. Well, I was floored. What the hell was this? It looked too real to be unreleased film footage. I was officially intrigued. Maybe this was worth the months of headaches and bloodshot eyes after all. I couldn't stop now. I started working down the list of links. With each click, everything got more and more bizarre. More disturbing, I stumbled upon a document called The Paragon Project, detailing trials of human experimentation that would lead to superhuman levels of strength and durability. It was an apparent success, looked official too. There were essays on space-time anomalies, glitches in reality, and apparent pictures of alternate dimensions. There were detailed explanations regarding Area 51, the Bermuda Triangle, assassinations, disappearances, and the true nature of the Holy Grail. One of the more upsetting ones was a document referring to a world-ending bomb, a nuke that's 720,000 times stronger than the one dropped on Hiroshima. I don't want to know why we would need that. I found contingency plans for different kinds of apocalypses, nuclear winter, biological weapons, and viral outbreaks. Some more peculiar ones were called the Marianas Trench Abnormality, the bluntly labeled Strange Man on the 15th Floor, and one simply referred to as Blackout. Recovered logs of Skinwalker Hunting Expedition's 911 transcript for residents of a town in Texas that went missing in 1977, and even the journals that belonged to the people involved in Dyatlov Pass incident. They didn't go insane because of the snow. I spent hours on there looking through pages and pages of things I felt like I wasn't supposed to see. I came across a trailer for a silent film made back in 1910, one that made people claw their eyes out after watching the nearly derailed the whole industry. There was a live stream of a hooded man sitting in front of a camera, head crouched down. He eventually lifted his head even though he had no mouth. A deep guttural hello came through my speakers. Somehow I knew it came from him. I didn't stick around for that. There were obscure sets of step-by-step guides that involved things like cutting off your limbs and sewing on a corpse, performing religious incantations in the middle of the Siberian forest, and going to coordinates that housed captive fallen angels. It was unclear what any of these were supposed to achieve. There was also a 20-second long clip titled, "The Futility of Living." I didn't watch it. That's when I realized there was no way even the highest form of organized government had full control of this. One of the scariest things about this whole experience was that I didn't find an end to the list. No matter far I scrolled down. I think I had a meltdown and passed out eventually because I woke up on my floor in the middle of the night. I looked at my computer screen to see looped helicopter footage of a massive crab-like creature tearing apart a coastal island. I clicked off of it. I just sat there for the longest time. I couldn't comprehend what I was seeing, and I don't think I wanted to. Now I'm not sure why I kept going. My brain was screaming for me to take my computer out to the lawn and smash it into pieces, but I didn't. I noticed something I hadn't before. A small message at the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. I don't know if it was always there or not. It was hard to read, so I had to squint. More Latin. Translated into, "Are you satisfied?" There were two options underneath it, yes and no. Now I knew the answer to this question. Hell no, I wasn't satisfied. I was horrified and scarred for life. But I should have clicked on yes. If I just clicked on yes, it would have taken me out of that godforsaken place, back to comfort and sanity. Even right now, I can't tell you why I clicked on no. But once I did, the page seemed to refresh. It was still the same basic setup, except there were only 4 links. This time there were no recognizable numbers or characters. Hell, it didn't look like anything that could have come from this world. Just a collection of extremely crude symbols that didn't give off any sense of pattern or direction. I clicked on the first link. After about 20 seconds, I slammed my computer shut. I can't describe to you what I saw. All I know is that I wasn't supposed to see it. Nobody should ever see something like this. It's not only that it didn't make any sense, but I also can't tell you why it didn't. My parents make me take a blood bath once a year. I found out why. Once a year, my parents had me take a blood bath. It was always on the day before my birthday. A tradition I didn't enjoy but never questioned. My mother would lead me to the top. My father sitting on the edge, dipping his fingers in to check the temperature for me. I would sit while they washed it into my skin of hair, making sure that I was completely covered before letting me get out. Then I would have to wait as it dried, making my skin feel tight and sticky. I was then sent off to bed with a hug and kiss on my birthday. The first thing I did was shower off watching the red retreat down the drain. Then it was like any other birthday, singing presents and cake. It never crossed my mind that our tradition was abnormal. I was excited for my 10th birthday. The prospect of having 2 digits to my age was exhilarating to me. I've been homeschooled my whole life but had plenty of friends in my neighborhood to invite to my party. I was asking my friend Jimmy if he was going to be able to come, when I caught a glimpse behind the veil. "Oh man, I have to go visit my cousins on Saturday, but maybe I can play with you the day before," he had asked. I thought about it but knew that my annual bath was due that day. Disappointed, I explained to him why that would work. "Shucks, that's the day I have to take my bath," I told him. "Okay, well maybe after that." "No, I'll be all sticky. Plus all the blood gets on everything." I could tell by his expression that I had said something wrong. He went running his mouth to everyone, calling me a vampire and upsetting both of our parents, albeit for different reasons. That night I had the first discussion about the blood baths with my father. He sat me on the couch and got real serious. "Now today will be the last time you ever talked about the bath you have to take," he stated sternly. He went on to explain that not everything we did was considered normal, and that by keeping it to myself I was doing us all a favor. After that discussion I became more curious. It was intriguing to me that not everybody had to take these baths as I aged into a teen. I started doing what all boys do. I rebelled hard since I didn't go to school. I tried even harder to fit in when I was around my friends. I smoked, I vandalized, I stole alcohol from my parents. Some of it could be attributed to peer pressure, but a lot of it was my own choices. I wanted a reputation, wanted to be revered as some sort of anarchist. So I kept pushing boundaries, creating a large wedge between my parents and myself. The eve of my 16th birthday, I decided that I would refuse my blood bath. I was lying on my bed listening to music and reading. When my mother came in to tell me they had gotten it ready for me, I knew it was coming. I had my response ready. "I'm not taking it," I said, refusing to look up from my book. "Bam! Please don't make this difficult, you know you need to," she said, wringing her hands furtively. I continued to ignore her, she pleaded. After a while my father came down to see what the delay was. "What's going on?" he asked, appearing in the doorway. My mother told him the situation. His face turned bright red. "Ben, this is happening one way or another," he shouted.
My cheating boyfriend slept with my sister and ruined my life, so I fell in love with his best friend. Part 1. My boyfriend and I dated for 3 years and everything seemed right about him to a young and naive teen like me at the time. I was 18, falling for a man in his late 20s who love-bombed me and said I love you on the second date. Considering this was my first relationship, and I was not used to receiving attention from guys, I did not know what was or wasn't a healthy boundary. and failed to put a stop to it early. I felt myself fall very hard for him, and I was convinced he was the man I was going to marry. We started dating after 3 dates. We had known each other for just 2 weeks. I said I love you within the first week of the relationship. I moved out of my parents' house into his just a month after I started seeing him. We moved way too fast for anything to ever work out between us, but up until I moved in there was nothing glaring in my face about it all being too much too soon. I quickly found out that moving in with him was the worst mistake of my life. He ended up asking for rent money despite promising he wouldn't do so previously, and that led to me having to work full-time while being in college instead of part-time. He also became extremely controlling, seemingly overnight. Things like him snooping through my phone while I slept were regular. Male friends were off the table, which would not have been a problem if he didn't have any female friends himself. I could not go out to clubs with my girlfriends. I couldn't really do anything. Still, as much as I hated living with him, I still loved him and I do not know how. He was a master manipulator, I suppose. Every time I would get the urge to leave, he would sit me down, sweet-talk me, take me on amazing dinner and make great love to me later that night. I would fall for him instantly again, and the cycle would repeat itself. This was a vicious cycle. He would control my life until I had enough. I expressed desire to leave, or at least my cheating boyfriend slept with my sister and ruined my life, so I fell in love with his best friend. Part 2. This cycle lasted a total of 3 years. Throughout the 3 years I had lost myself. I had stopped going to the gym as my mental health was so bad from being with him. I had stopped eating and had no appetite. I was always tired and now working 50 hours a week as he had forced me to pay majority of the bills and rent, and of course my school grades suffered so much I was barely scraping by. I had even cut contact with my parents as he had convinced me that they were no good for me and that they were trying to keep us apart. I was 22 at this point and coasting through life, expecting to be treated like garbage every day. I was never hit, but I was certainly emotionally and verbally abused and manipulated. The moment I finally left him was the most painful moment of my life. I thought I had checked out of the relationship. There was no way he could hurt me without laying hands on me, I thought. He could cheat, do whatever. I did not care. That was my thought process at the time. This thought process was proven incorrect, however, when I came home one day after a 12-hour shift to the sound of a woman upstairs groaning. I suspected that he had an affair going on actually. I had checked his phone while he was asleep a few weeks ago and found a few bookings made on different hotel sites. There were other signs of him having an affair too. The usual signs of him being protective of his phone, using apps that were later deleted, things like that. We actually had a fight about it, a fight where I brought up how he was booking hotel rooms and being secretive of his phone. He ended up gaslighting and guilt-tripping me into giving him an apology, and yet he never even explained why the hotels were ever booked. So when I heard the sound of the woman upstairs, I knew what was going on. All of my suspicions were about to be confirmed true, and I was finally going to have a legit reason for leaving him, and I was finally going to have him out of my life.
Part 1 of 2. My 20 male friend, 22 male, wants me to step aside so he can try to date my not girlfriend, 18 female. A little over 3 years ago I had just gotten out of a relationship with an abusive girl. I broke up with her shortly before I graduated high school and wanted to take some time to focus on myself. Of course, a few weeks after the breakup, I met the most gorgeous girl ever, and we really hit it off. I'll refer to her as Lisa. She had also gotten out of an abusive relationship, so neither of us were looking for anything serious. At the time, my driver's license was suspended, too much speeding, bad time in my life, learned my lesson, and my friend, I'll call him Ken, would offer to drive me to see her. For a few months, we would mostly just all hang out together because we all got along really well, and she and I would mostly just cuddle up if we were all watching a movie. Sometimes we would sneak off for a few minutes to make out a little, but not long because we didn't want to be rude to Ken. Lisa and Ken developed their own friendship during this time, but it was obviously platonic on both ends, like an older brother/younger sister dynamic. Ken also had a girlfriend of 4 years then, but they were hanging by a thread. After 6 months, I got my license back and I'd go see Lisa/take her out without Ken. At that point Lisa and I started having intimacy. We both really liked each other, but I panicked and sort of ghosted her for a few weeks. Lisa and Ken continued talking, and he said he wasn't going to stop being friends with her because I was being an idiot. Fair enough. I realized I was being stupid and Lisa agreed to see me again. We immediately picked right back up where we left off. Around this time Ken and his girlfriend broke up, so I moved with him. I would go see Lisa a few times a week and she would come to our place on the weekends and we would all hang out. That continued for several more months until she ghosted me for about 2 weeks. She told Ken she was afraid I would bail again and she didn't want to go through the pain again. Part 2 of 2. My 20 male friend, 22 male, wants me to step aside so he can try to date my not girlfriend, 18 female. We worked it out, but embarrassingly this cycle has since repeated once or twice. Not in over a year though. Over the last year especially, mostly since she turned 18, I've noticed Ken has acted differently around Lisa. He'll flirt with her in front of me. She's very friendly with him, but does not flirt back and pulls away when he touches her. I told him I don't like it, but he said it doesn't matter if he flirts with her, she loves me. She says she doesn't feel that way about Ken at all, and everything indicates that's the truth. Ken has also started drinking more lately, and the other night, Lisa was not here, he started whining about life not being fair. I took the bait and asked what was wrong, and he started rambling about how Lisa is too good for me and I don't deserve her. I agree, but it still pissed me off. He then told me he is in love with her, has been for a while, and if I cared for either of them at all, I'd step aside so he could pursue her. I didn't want to argue with him while he was drunk, so I went to bed. I confronted him in the morning and he doubled down. He said that I can't commit. I can't give her what she wants/needs. She isn't my girlfriend. She is fair game to try to date. Am I wrong for thinking this is messed up? Lisa and I do have an unconventional relationship. I'll admit. We don't refer to each other as boyfriend/girlfriend. But we don't sleep with other people. We tell each other we love each other. She usually stays at my place. And we have a good relationship with each other's families. I think we're pretty happy together. I know she doesn't want to be with him. So I'm not worried about that. But since Ken said those things, I can't help but question if I'm being unfair to Lisa by holding her back with me. Part 1 of 2. My parents want me to wait to propose for my golden child sister's proposal. My parents want me to delay proposing to my girlfriend and they are both mad I said no to that. My parents and I usually got along, but I always knew I wasn't their favorite child. I have 4 siblings and I'm the middle child. Growing up, they always had the motto that the firstborn gets everything they want. Since she's technically the test baby, they always tried to give her the world to set the precedent for the rest of us. The issue is that they never actually gave the rest of us the same treatment. She would always get the brand new iPhones, while we would get the cheapest Androids you could find. If we were lucky, we would get her hand-me-downs when she decided she wanted something new. I loved her, but I hated always being second to her in my parents' eyes. Anytime we'd get in a fight, she'd always be right in their eyes. There was a time when I was fighting them really hard on getting my way and I heard my dad mutter under his breath that he wished the birth control worked. Ever since then, I decided that I had to accept it. Otherwise I'd be fighting a brick wall. I am going to propose to my girlfriend on Friday. I mentioned it to dad and stepmother because they invited me and her over for dinner Friday night and I reminded them that it is our anniversary and said I was going to propose. Their reaction threw me off because they were both happy for me, but they also asked me to delay my proposal. Part 2 of 2. My parents want me to wait to propose for my golden child sister's proposal. They said it is because of one of my sisters. They said she is hopeful about getting engaged soon and I should wait until after that before I propose. My mom and stepfather also feel the same way. That sister is in a relationship. However, they have been together for 9.5 years. They have a son and a daughter. They own a condo and a business together, but they aren't married. My sister's partner says he is fine without being married and he feels he doesn't need a piece of paper for their relationship to be real. He's been clear he doesn't want marriage. My sister on the other hand really wants to be married and to have a wedding. I don't think I should have to wait. Firstly, I don't believe a proposal is imminent like my dad and my mom said. Secondly, I don't think I should have to put my life on hold just for my sister's life, and I don't think her being upset about me getting married when she isn't is on me. My sister has more money than I do. She has a loving partner and beautiful, healthy kids. If she is upset about me getting engaged, she needs to look at herself. I told my dad and my mom I'm not putting anything on hold and I don't care if news of my engagement will upset my sister. They didn't take it well even if they reiterated how happy they are that I'm proposing. They want me to reconsider. I think they should go to hell.
What is the oddest reason you have been contacted by your child's school? My emergency-only mobile rang in the middle of a lesson. Please, can you come immediately to the school? Your son is attached to a tree, and it's raining. I took a deep breath. Is he hurt? Why won't he come inside? I'm just the secretary, I don't know. Would you like me to see if I can find out and ring you back? No. Heaven forbid she could actually know what the problem was before phoning me. So I had to find cover, leave my school, and walk 20 minutes to his. And what emergency did I find? They had told my boy, who has a complex prescription, to take off his glasses to play contact rugby. It was raining, it was cold, he couldn't see, he's autistic, and they wanted him to play a contact sport. Just no sense. So, he had attached himself to a tree and refused to let go. Good strategy. I slipped and slid my way across the muddy pond of a pitch, simply said, "It's Mom," and gained one cold, soggy, muddy, crying limpet of a child. After a very long hug, we went to his changing room, found his glasses, I dried him off, and warmed him up. Then we went home because I wouldn't have left him there for the world. I still think it was a very odd reason to contact me. Not one adult from a staff of about 70 apparently had the skills to detach a small child from a tree.
I asked my wife for an open relationship. Now things are weird. Been married for 10 years, and it's been the same stuff for that time. The time between intimacy sessions was getting further and further apart. I felt like a beta in the relationship because even simple stuff like coming to bed topless or certain positions or favors would get shot down. That coupled with little instances of disrespect and not being heard has driven me to thinking about walking away. I had asked for marriage counseling before and it never got followed up on. Finally, I asked for an open relationship or a sex hall pass because my sex drive is ramped up because I'm taking testosterone. Now she goes into damage control mode where I get everything I asked for in terms of intimacy, but I know that she doesn't want to do it. It still looked at like a chore to keep me home with her and my 2 teenage sons. I know that if I leave, I'll still be involved in their life and stuff. I'm just not happy and I've never put my happiness first. I'm at a stage where I get to embrace the man that I feel like I am and everyone thinks it's a stunt or midlife crisis or whatever. I'm trying really hard to forget what people say or think and chase my own heart. I have been open, honest, and faithful for 10 years and I'm repaid with nothing. I might as well have cheated because now there's a trust issue where she asks who I'm talking